Dirty Birds, football is back here in Flowery Branch. OTAs, man.
OTAs.
They just started. We just saw, well, I say we, you just saw the first practice. I had to be inside doing some managerial work.
Don't act like you don't have a nice, lovely, lovely big window.
I can say that I was looking out the window pretty significantly, but I was not down on the sidelines because of my schedule today. You were. So this is actually a very important podcast for yours truly, as well for those listening and watching at home, because I wasn't out there. So I don't know what was happening.
You're learning with our audience.
I am
this
literally
is real time.
This is real time learning for me, which I'm really excited to get into. So we're going to spend the next 10, 15 minutes going over everything you saw at practice. Now, remember, everybody, this is a voluntary OTAs. Mandatory minicamp doesn't start for another, week and a half? Mm-hmm. And so this is something that we will be checking in every now and again with the podcast.
Only a couple of media availabilities,
right.
I think, per kind of phase, right? So we had one today. Mm-hmm. We'll have another one next week. And then I don't know the rest of the schedule off the top of my head, but we will keep you updated from there.
We will literally be there from start to finish. So let's dive in, because I have a few questions that I want to get to. Overall, I think that this is a really important time for a lot of players and coaches. It's a big part of install. I know last year, talking to Zach Robinson, he was like, this is where majority of the work that we need to do, the brunt of the work, we need to be putting in this offense. It's all about what's happening in the meeting rooms and inside your own brain. But this year's a little bit different in that a lot of these offensive players are carryover from last year. A lot of them know what they're doing. A lot of them know exactly kind of what Zach Robinson is implementing or has already implemented. And then you do have some new faces on the defense, Jeff Ulbrich included, but Jeff Ulbrich has said, you know what, I want to make this as simple of a defense as I possibly can in terms of scheme. So I guess my question for you is like, as you are looking at this OTA period and the first time you're getting to see these guys really out on the grass, what should the goal for this Atlanta Falcons team be right now? And what did Raheem Morris say earlier today about it?
The overarching goal for any period before the regular season starts is to stay healthy. So that is number one. And you're going to hear that 100 million times between now and the start of the regular season. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, I think it's kind of like two different things, right? For the rookies, it's just getting acclimated to the speed of an NFL practice. It's understanding where to be, when to be there, how fast to move from period to period, individual drills, team drills, all of that, right? Because they need every single rep to matter, and time is very precious in kind of the current landscape of the NFL. So that's kind of what this is for the rookies. But I want to go back because one of the most interesting things to me about today's practice was, yes, this is a returning offense with a lot of known starters, veterans in the case of, Jake Matthews and Chris Lindstrom and now Drake London. We can kind of say that. So there are known commodities on this offense. However, I kind of think that this is still a little bit of an install period for Atlanta because of how singularly talented Michael Penix Jr. is in terms of where he can put the ball on the field, which is to just say like anywhere. So
right.
I do think you're going to see a newer version of this offense than we saw last year with Kirk Cousins running the show at this point in time. So because of that, there were some growing pains I think we saw out there on day one of OTAs, which is very important to stress. But
well, that was going to be my question.
There's some shots.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, what did Michael Penix Jr. look like? This is really the first time that you're getting to see him with a helmet on, throwing to his receivers honestly, since last season. The season ended. So how did he look today?
He looked a little bumpy, to be honest, particularly in kind of the 11-on-11 periods. And it's just tough to tell if it was gloomy and muggy and rainy and kind of it was an off day for him.
Which it was. It was gross outside today.
It was very gross outside. Really cold, too. Yeah. Talked a lot about on the sidelines amongst the media members who were ill-prepared for this weather.
No one was prepared.
But it just looked a little bit sloppy, just the whole offense. And that's what I'm kind of getting at is I do think that this is still going to be a little bit of a learning process as you get going into even the preseason, right? So that is, but then the positive for Michael Penix was particularly, and take this with a grain of salt because, again, it's OTAs.
Right.
They're throwing against air.
Yeah. And you also don't really know exactly what they're being asked to do, what they're specifically working on. I always try to tell people that, especially during like training camp. It's like, yes, you're seeing kind of some of these big flashy plays, but you don't know what the defense is trying to do. You don't know what they're installing. There's just a lot of like unknowns in terms of what's being asked of these players.
The only people that know it are the ones out there on the field and the coaching staff. But in this particular example, none of that matters because it was just the touch on some of his short throws. We talk about his arm strength and how he can launch down the field, but last season, I think particularly in training camp early on, I noticed that's a 5-yard slant, man. You don't need to put it like right between his eyeballs as fast as you can. And so today I just watched some of those slants, some of those quick ins, those outs, much more touch on the ball, kind of feathery, a lot better pace. So that was a positive that I think actually matters more than the sloppy nature of the play out there because that's just day one of OTAs.
Right. And again, gross outside.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't want to be out there. It just so happened that I wasn't. But no, I'm glad that you bring up Michael Penix, and I'm glad that you kind of broke down how he looked and maybe the reasons why, but also a little bit of like, this is still very early on. There's still a lot of questions that we have to answer in regards to Michael Penix and where he's going. But something else that I really wanted to touch on with you is, again, like I mentioned off the top, this is voluntary OTAs. You don't have to be here. Players don't have to be here if they don't want to. But it's a really important time, again, in terms of install. So when you were looking out there at the full gamut of what players were there, who was there, who wasn't?
Kirk Cousins was not there, which Raheem Morris, talked about in the press conference beforehand. Said he hadn't seen him in the building, but again, these are voluntary. So he's been around, he hasn't been around. It kind of is besides the point because again, Michael Penix Jr. is really the focus out there on the field.
And like what we've said, this is going to be a fluid situation until it's not.
Exactly. And if he's the backup quarterback, everybody's comfortable with that. So everything is just proceeding the way it has been forever.
Right.
Time is a flat circle. What is anything anymore? Ryan Nuzul out there continuing to practice with the team. Dwayne Ledford has spoken twice, the offensive line coach here in Atlanta, about Ryan Nuzul and how excited he is and kind of the continuity that he brings and what he showed in his 8 starts last year. So even though nothing has been signed on the dotted line, for all intents and purposes, the plan is Nuzul is the guy at center there. Yeah,
and I think with Nuzul, it's interesting because you're right. Like, he's technically not under contract right now. And he's
signed a medical waiver, I believe, to practice.
Okay, so that's what's interesting about this, and it makes me think, and this is Tori talking, this is not the Falcons organization or front office or anything like that, but it makes me think that it's potentially, the Falcons are potentially setting up a maybe longer term deal with Ryan Nuzul because it's taken so long. Because if you were just going to sign him to the 1-year tender that I think is just north of like $3 million in 1 year, then you would have already done it. It makes me kind of think that they're opening the door a little bit, that they really believe in Ryan Nuzul and they really think that they could have something longer term with him, even if they were to, let's say, go and draft a starting center next offseason. To have him as a backup, we've seen what he's been as a backup.
Yeah, and they're not afraid, as they've shown and said, to add competition even where there is some. So, I don't think it precludes you from adding at the position moving forward. And, we'll see where it goes from here. But, again, it seems as though Ryan Nuzul is going to be the starting center here in Atlanta in 2025 , even though it just is he's not on the roster.
Right. That's what we've been told.
It's weird.
Right?
It's a little weird. There's always one weird thing with an offensive lineman, Tori.
Always.
Every single training camp, preseason, offseason, you name it. There's something weird with the offensive line that we got to touch on.
I'm just glad I'm not talking about the left guard anymore.
They shifted one inside.
They really did.
We got the center position to talk about.
Man, but no. So when it comes to guys who were out there and who weren't, it's interesting because you do get a lot of guys off of IR that are coming back slowly but surely. Guys like Younghoe Koo, guys like Braylon Trice, DeMarco Helms. What updates do you have for the people listening and myself about where these guys are?
So Braylon Trice not out there practicing with the team, kind of still in his recovery and rehabilitation phase after tearing his ACL last preseason, unfortunately. Raheem Morris says we'll see maybe by training camp he's back. They would certainly like to get him back in the fold by then. But, with a young player whose career is fully ahead of him, you want to be cautious with these types of things. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if we'll see how it all plays out. Younghoe Koo has been kicking. We spoke to him after practice. He says he's kicking about 2 days a week now, which is a good kind of place that he likes to be at. It is consistent with his routine, has been, over the years. So seems like he's in a good spot as he works back from the injury last year. And then DeMarco Hellams was back out there.
Cool.
And that's awesome. That's great to see. He also got injured in that same game as Braylon Trice, but I think the Falcons kind of sneaky are high on at least a role for him. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying he's all of a sudden starting right across from Jesse Bates fully, but I think they have a way to use him in mind, and they are excited to see what that's going to look like in this defense.
Let's talk about Younghoe Koo a little bit, because I know that this is going to be a topic of conversation over the next months. And as we get into the regular season, is like the Falcons do have a kicking competition on their hands. They brought in competition for Younghoe Koo. I know that you talked to him a little bit after practice, kind of what's his mentality going into, I guess, this next period of his career.
Yeah, I mean, he said that he welcomed kind of the competition at this point in time. It's not any different than it has been in years past. Typically, teams do go into training camp with 2 kickers on the roster, and there is some competition. And, then he kind of said all the right things of even when you make the roster, you're competing against 31 other, kickers around the league and whoever else may be available. So I think the biggest thing for him was once he identified, all right, this injury is not getting any better. It is something that he says he's dealt with before as a kicker. It is just kind of the natural hip injury.
Wear and tear,
Yeah, and what was interesting is I spoke to him kind of earlier in the season, way before any of this ever cropped up, just kind of asking about his workout and how he stays healthy and for the long term. And really it's about your core. It's your core that keeps your hips tight and in place because everything is stabilized much better. So I think all of that, once it just kind of started getting a little bit out of whack, it broke down from there, right? And there wasn't a way that they could get it healthier without taking a step back. Right. So that's when they went on IR and all of that. And unfortunately, the Falcons didn't make the playoffs, so season ended, and then he went into his offseason. But I think he's looking forward to a competition. I think most importantly, he is focused on his regimen, his routine. Koo is a very structured guy. He doesn't like to deviate from his habit, as most great kickers are. Kickers are like golfers. They're creatures of habit and routine.
Yeah.
So it sounds like he is right back in his and looking forward to proving it once again in training camp.
I know that's one of the competitions I'm looking at most closely, but another competition that I'm really curious to see how this goes is at nickel. And, I think that it's no secret that between D. Alford, Clark Phillips, and now Billy Bowman Jr., there is kind of this wide open competition, at least in my head, about what the starting nickel package could look like. And I know that one of the questions that I keyed you up on is, hey, who's someone who stood out in this one singular practice that we're talking about? What's one person or one position group? And you actually brought up Billy Bowman Jr. Can you explain why?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you could kind of see from both of the Falcons' rookie safeties, Xavier Watts and Billy Bowman, there is a real legitimate field speed to them. And I think there's instincts that allow them to play a lot faster than maybe the numbers during the draft process might suggest, right? Because that's what we all get caught up on. It's like, is it a 4.47 or is it a 4.53? And if one, then we can't draft him. If it's the other, he's a first rounder. It's like, how quickly can they diagnose things out on the field? And that was something where seeing Billy Bowman, who's playing close to the line of scrimmage, that's got to be a quality that you have. You have to see things quickly and, more importantly, react as soon as you recognize what is happening. And then Xavier Watts on the back end, I thought, kind of demonstrated the same qualities. As soon as the ball was out of a quarterback's hand, boom, he was breaking and going. So really, it's that nickel combo with the safety, because I think the Falcons have the personnel, and you lump Kevin King in there, Billy Bowman for sure, but D. Alford, Clark Phillips, there are some bodies that are very different. If you want to go big nickel, you maybe put a Kevin King in there. If you want to go, a little smaller but quicker, that's maybe Billy Bowman, that's D. Alford. There are a lot of options that the Falcons do have, and again, that feels like it's across the board on this defense. You look at the defensive line, options. You look at edge rusher, options. You look at nickel, options. Safety, options. there is a lot of versatility to this defense and malleability for how the coaching staff wants to ultimately deploy it.
So when you are looking at, we talk defense, let's switch over offense. Who stood out offensively for you that you were really, either excited to see out there today or somebody who caught your eye?
It was really solid for the offensive line. That's kind of a bad answer, but again, it wasn't like the greatest day for the offense. I thought Bijan did have a nice, really good long run down the left sideline that was notable, showcased his speeds. Everybody, Tyler Algier showcased his vision too as well. Tegan Quitoriano, the new tight end that they brought in as a free agent, he was somebody who really was not on my radar going into today, but I just kind of noticed in a little like Charlie Warner light role, John Fitzpatrick last year as well, more of a run blocker, but did great in that role. And I thought the offensive line was the offense overall was like the most impressive part and kind of the one part that took it to the defense. So overall, it was a good day for Atlanta's defense, I would say.
Nice. Interesting. I'm very fascinated to see kind of how this progresses. And it's like, okay, defense won the day-to-day. But they
always start fast,
right? And then it's like, what happens when you really get the pads on? What happens when you start really going fast?
And none of the rookies with the first team, should mention. So again, it wasn't like, oh, now you've inserted these 4 rookies into the lineup and the defense has gone far and away better. It was still, you had Leonard Floyd out there, Arnold Ebiketie was out there. You had your kind of veteran guys that you know and love out there on the defense.
Well, there's so many more practices ahead. This is the first of very many, you guys, like whether it's the spring and or summer or training camp when we get into it. But Will, thank you so much for sitting down and talking to me and catching me up on all of the things that happened out at practice today.
Glad you got my memo about pink.
I know we're matching. For those not watching at home, we both are wearing pink, and it is hilarious. So I am going to actually let you go because I'm going to get Terrin Waack in this seat. She's written a story on edge rushers and first-year production and what realistic expectations should be. So I'm very excited to talk to her a little bit about that and what makes Jalon Walker and James Pearce Jr. tick and what that could mean for them in year one. But thank you so much for joining me, Will.
Of course, anytime.
All right, I've switched Will out for Terrin Waack. Terrin, welcome to the podcast studio.
Sorry, I'm not in pink, but you won't catch me in pink.
I was about to say, honestly, I know for a fact Terrin and I will always match when she's in all black, and if I wear any color at all, it's not going to happen.
No, I'm sorry.
But no, I'm really excited to welcome you into the podcast studio today because you wrote a story yesterday. We're recording this on... What day is it? Wednesday?
Today's Tuesday.
Today's Tuesday. We're recording this on Tuesday. The holiday, the Memorial Day weekend really got me. Woo. So I hope everybody had a great Memorial Day weekend. But anyways, it is Tuesday. You wrote a story that ran earlier this morning about expectations that we should have for year one pass rushers that are taken in the first round. And I really thoroughly enjoyed reading it. You put a lot of work in. Everybody go to atlantafalcons.com and check out Terrin's work. It's a 2-part story. There's a main analysis, and then there is a separate story that we've linked in the story that kind of breaks down all of the numbers, particularly sack numbers, that Terrin has pulled for these guys. So as we're talking about this, if you're not doing anything, go pull it up on the site and walk through it with us, because I have a few questions that I'm really excited to get to. But first things first is why did you want to tell this story? Obviously the Falcons have not 1, but 2 first-round picks that are going to be coming off the edge in 2025. So where did this story idea kind of come from for you?
I mean, it just came from questions that were asked immediately after the 2 were selected.
Right.
I remember Jalon Walker was selected. Well, and JPJ, James Pearce Jr., on the same day. So the press conference was the same.
Yeah.
But I remember being in there and multiple people being like, oh, pass rushers in year one don't have the production. Why are you confident these 2 can have an immediate impact? And of course, the Falcons leadership is confident they can have an immediate impact. And I was like, what's the validity behind this question? Is it true? Do rookie pass rushers kind of not really have the numbers that you would want? Is there a jump in year 2? When does the jump come, if so? And so I looked at the numbers to see if this is true, because that question came from somewhere and I was like, where? And the numbers do show that in their first year, pass rushers tend to not really show the numbers that you would want regardless of the round they were picked in. And so what I did is I looked at the past 5 years of all linebackers and all defensive linemen, which some could argue some of them wouldn't pass rush, some of them wouldn't do this, but like for simplicity's sake, anyone who's not in the secondary can be involved in the pass rush. And so I just looked at them because everyone does their defense differently.
Of course. Yeah.
I wasn't.
And everyone names their guys differently. Right. Sometimes like some guys are defensive ends, sometimes they're outside linebackers. Like it depends on your coaching staff and what they.
So I did the big buckets of linebacker and defensive lineman.
There.
And I did the last 5 years because that means you've cycled out of your rookie contract if you had your 5th year. And with that, I just looked at their sack totals year over year. And on average, in year 1, in their first year, these 5 years, they averaged 3.3 sacks.
Which that's kind of bananas to me because that was where I was thinking in my mind, because you even asked me the question, you're like, okay, like in a first year, what would you deem to be a realistic expectation in terms of just sheer sack numbers? We're not talking about quarterback hits. We're not talking about pressures. We're not talking about that. We're literally just
Simply
talking
sacks.
about sacks. And I think I said to you like 5 or 6. I was like, that could be a really good year if you get 5 or 6. And then to know that over the course of the last 5 years, it's been around 3 for like per individual as an average, like that was kind of shocking to me.
You look at last year alone. Chop Robinson had 6 sacks, but when you take their class average, it was 3.2 because you had a low of a half a sack. And so when you look at all, 6 of them, there was 4 sacks, there was a half sack, there were 3 sacks, 4.5 sacks, 6 sacks, 1 sack. So it is kind of a little all over the place, but when you take the average, last year's first rounders who pass rush averaged 3.2, which is below the average of the crop I pulled.
Right.
But there's still outliers. Like Will Anderson in 2023 had 7.
Of course. Yeah.
Aiden Hutchinson had 9.5 in 2022. Micah Parsons, the biggest outlier of this entire study, had
Micah
13 in
Yeah.
2021 as a rookie. Then you even go back to 2020 when Chase Young had 7.5.
Yeah.
But what was even more interesting is when you get into the numbers of year 2, there's a significant jump. The average of the 5 years, you can't count last year because they didn't get to year 2.
Right.
But the average of the 4 before was, let me zoom out, 4.7.
Yeah.
So that's a significant jump. Like, yes, it only looks like 1 to 2-ish, but you're looking at an entire class. And again, there's a huge range of numbers here, but it is proven that year 1 to year 2, there is a jump. And you can see that with the numbers too. Like, gosh, Will Anderson went from 7 to 11 to pull the exact same guys.
Yeah.
Aiden Hutchinson went from 9.5 to 11.5. Micah Parsons, well, he went from 13 to 13.5. So it's still, like, again, it's
Micah
not a big
Parsons
jump, but
outlier.
it's still a mad number.
Right,
So, and then he went to 14. So you see year over year. And even I picked 2 guys or 3 guys that worked directly with Jeff Ulbrich or worked directly with Nate Ollie, and you saw the same trends out of them. And so I know they're confident that they can get this immediate impact out of Jalon Walker and James Pearce Jr. But I'll be curious to see if, like, they can. Like, if they break this average.
Yeah, because that's the thing is, like, when I'm thinking about what does immediate impact look like? You know, like, what does immediate impact look like for the Falcons with Jalon Walker and James Pearce Jr.? Are you okay with 3.5 sacks for each guy throughout an entire season? I don't know. I guess it depends on what Arnold Ebiketie is doing. It depends on what Leonard Floyd is doing, Braylon Trice. You know, I think that you have to look at it from a holistic standpoint of your pass rush. Caden Ellis, if Caden Ellis leads this team again in sacks, are you okay with that?
Right.
I guess it depends on the number. You know,
what
like,
did he have? 5.5 last year. And I think Arnold Ebiketie led with 6.5.
Yeah.
It was around that. It was in that range.
Right. So are you okay with that? I guess it depends. To my point, it's like it depends on the collective unit as a whole. So I'm curious for you, as you were really diving into all of this and really learning about what type of jump can be made from year 1 to year 2. I'm curious, what does all of this mean for Jalon Walker and James Pearce Jr. in their first year?
I think people can relax a little bit on the expectations for them because you named so many people that I think of Nate Ollie said the other day where it's like, you're not going to have one guy with this astronomical number with this attack style front that they want to implement. You're going to have, like, as a collective unit, a big number. Like, you don't really want one superstar. He used the phrase no independent contractors. Like, you're not going to have one superstar in this style. It's kind of just like all coming at it in the wave after wave kind of thing that he's been describing. And so if it is around 3 or 4 for those two, I would consider it success as long as you are with the average or above average in my mind, because there are so many others. Right. And I think the public in general, because I put a poll out that's like, what would you realistically consider a good year for either of these? And I think the range was 1 to 3, 4 to 5, 6 to 8. I'm missing numbers somewhere because the final one was 10 and up, but around that.
Yeah.
And on average, mostly everyone picked, I think, like the second or third
one.
Like
the 4 to 6
Yeah,
range.
4 to 6 range. I'm messing up my own poll right now.
Hey,
but
that's fine.
I was like, your expectations are a little high.
Here's the thing, though. What's funny is like...
That's not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. And what I think is really interesting is the Falcons, and you wrote about this in your story, the Falcons have been in the bottom quartile of sacks over the last, 5 years?
Since 2018, they are last.
Yeah, last in collective sacks over that time frame. So honestly, what we're talking about in terms of realistic expectations and the jump you could make in pass rush, if you can go from 32 to 25, that's a great jump for this team, this organization, considering how little movement there's been in terms of sack production collectively over the last 7-8 years. So I know that I talked to Will a little bit about what he saw and took away from practice. And I want to ask you, kind of in the context of this story and really looking at Waack and looking at JPJ, like these two guys who this coaching staff, and let's be honest, this fan base wants to come in and make an impact immediately. What did they kind of look like out during their first OTA practice?
Anytime you say Waack, I think of my father. So
I know.
And I'm like, how was my dad out there? Just kidding.
Jeffrey.
Jalon Walker had some reps with the first team, which I thought was very noteworthy because Raheem Morris did say, what was it, at rookie minicamp, that it is realistic to expect the rookies to play in year one, to make an impact year one and play significant reps. And so to see that already being implemented or like getting a few reps here and there, it wasn't like a lot,
right? Yeah.
But just seeing it in general was interesting. I can't really speak on James Pearce Jr. and how he performed in team because he didn't. I'm not really sure why.
Yeah.
We spoke to Raheem Morris before practice, not after. I'm sure that might be a question when we do get to talk to Raheem next.
Yeah.
So I can't speak on that. He was there, though, and, like, actively watching.
And did all, like, individual stuff. Yeah.
He was running off to the side a bit later.
Yeah.
So not sure what that is. He practiced in rookie, right?
Yeah.
Like, fully. Yeah, so who knows? It was a gross day. Maybe it was just...
We'll ask more questions.
Yeah.
Again, as I said earlier with Will, like, we have a lot of practice time ahead of us, and I don't think this one practice is going to make or break much of anything at all. But is there anything else you want to say about this case study and writing this story and anything that you enjoyed about it?
I think the key here is just to be pleasantly surprised, happily surprised, rather than being unrealistically hopeful. Like, keep a level head of it. Maybe level-headed, like, I don't know. I can't think of a what is, I don't know. Yeah. I was going to think of, I can't think of the word I want to say. Anyways, that's embarrassing. But it's just being realistic. I know people are very, very excited about Jalon Walker and James Pearce Jr. both, and rightly so.
Right. They should be. They're first-round draft picks. You went up into the first round to get James Pearce Jr. again to make sure that you had two pass rushers going into 2025, an area of significant need. So, yes, there should be a level of excitement.
You be as excited as you want.
Yes.
Just don't be mean if their numbers aren't exactly what you want them to be later.
Because technically speaking, like, according to Terrin and all the work that you put in on this story, like, it's not astronomical. Like, the outliers of Aiden Hutchinson and Micah Parsons, they are who they are because they're the outliers.
In 5 years, there's one player who had double-digit sacks in their rookie year.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, let's taper expectations a little bit, people.
Like, but go ahead. If they go and have 20 sacks?
20?
I don't know. If they do that, then round of applause. I'll throw the study in the trash.
Yeah.
Or I'll just redo it, and you'll skew the average, and you'll be the outlier. All the math terms necessary.
All of the things. All right. Well, this has been a really fascinating conversation. Again, everybody go check out Terrin's work on AtlantaFalcons.com. I know I really enjoyed reading it and checking it out, and it really did help me, I think, put into perspective what my own expectations are.
It's like any other position, people.
Right. So I would definitely recommend you guys go check that out. Well, that's going to do it for the Atlanta Falcons Podcast Network, coming to you after the Falcons' very first OTA practice. Again, make sure and like, comment, subscribe. You can catch us anywhere where you can find your podcast, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Pod. Terrin and I, and Will too, we'll be back at a later date. We have a lot more, many more practices to get to. Hopefully the next one isn't as gross.
I don't want to say where's summer, because then I'm going to be like, why is it so hot?
I know. It was. That's what's so crazy is I've never had an OTA practice that was like frigid, and this one was cold. But we will be back next time, so make sure and check it out. Until then, guys, thanks so much.